Good morning, I'm Gary Stone from Paddleboard Specialist. We're going to go out and paddle this morning the Surftech Bark Competitor 12.6 and the Hobie Elite Carbon 12.6 by 27 3/4. We've been training and racing on these boards for well over a month now and have a really good sense of what they're about. The weight of the Bark is just over 30 pounds and the Hobie is 24 pounds. What we found is paddling in flat water like this morning at a very high cadence, the Hobie has a definite advantage in that it has lower mass, but we also don't feel like it glides quite as well as the Bark. In downwind conditions, the Bark has a little more nose rocker, a little more V underneath the bottom. The Hobie's quite flat on the bottom, and in those conditions, the Bark has a definite advantage. The other thing that we'd like to see added to the Hobie board would either be a pad that extends back toward the tail, or some non-skids so that when you want to do some pivot turns at the marks or step back doing a downwind run, that you have plenty of traction. So we're going to head out on the water and shoot a little bit of video. You're going to be able to see the boards paddled individually and also side by side. Here you can see a straight comparison of the noses of the boards. They both have very fine entries with very pointy noses. The Hobie is quite flat on the bottom, which works very, very well in flat water, but not quite as well in a downwind run. It has quite a flat rocker line. The Bark board, you can see the V extends back from the bow and has more of a rounded shape, which handles the downwind swell, getting into the next swell and getting a good glide, in our experience, better than the Hobie does. The fins on these boards are a little different. We find they both track quite well, though we give the advantage to the Bark in terms of tracking, number of strokes you can do per side before you have to switch with a good vertical stroke. The fin on the Bark is a molded carbon and glass fin, and the race fin on the Hobie has more rake angle to it. One thing we appreciate about that here in the Midwest is it also does a very good job at shedding weeds. Here comes Scott on the Surftech Bark competition. He weighs 220. See how beautifully the nose of the board cuts through the chop, or cuts through the lack of chop, I should say.
Here's Gary on the Hobie Elite. You can see that it's got a pretty flat nose. There's not a lot of rocker. It cuts nicely through the water. You'll notice that Gary hasn't switched sides with his paddle. The Hobie keeps a really nice straight line.